Blood spread in an uneven pool across the worn linoleum floor of the kitchen. Detective Ezra Kingston carefully stepped over a broken glass, its shards glinting in the morning light filtering through the dirty curtains. Devin Ziegler's body lay at the base of the refrigerator, one arm twisted unnaturally, his eyes wide open, as if in a final moment of surprise. "Time of death?" Kingston asked the medical examiner, crouching next to the body. "Preliminary estimate is between 10 o'clock and 11 p.m., he replied, removing his latex gloves. "Blunt head trauma. See this corner of the countertop? Looks like he hit it when he fell. But there were previous blows. Someone beat him up pretty badly before that." Kingston nodded, surveying the small kitchen of the two-room house in the southern part of Chicago. The Inglewood neighborhood was not known for its peaceful disposition, but murders in homes were less common than shootouts on the streets. The victim was about 55 years old, strongly built, with visible signs of heavy physical labor on his hands. "Who found the body?" Kingston turned to the young officer who was making notes in his notebook. "A neighbor, sir, Mrs. Tompkins. She says she came over this morning to borrow some milk and found the door ajar." "Does she know any relatives?" "A son. We've already called him," replied the officer, leafing through his notes. "Keenan Ziegler, 28 years old, lives alone 3 blocks away. Works for some computer company downtown." Kingston took out his phone and took several pictures of the crime scene, trying to capture every detail, every possible clue. 20 years on the force had taught him that it was often the little things that revealed the truth. "Detective, he's here," the same officer called after 15 minutes. A tall young man stood at the entrance to the house with a confused look on his face. He was dressed out of place: expensive jeans, designer sneakers, a thin cashmere sweater. The contrast with the dilapidated house was striking. "Mr. Ziegler?" Kingston approached him, extending his hand. "Detective Ezra Kingston, I'm very sorry." What happened?" Kinana's voice trembled, his eyes darting between the detective's face and the yellow police tape blocking the entrance to the kitchen. "Where's my father?" "I'm afraid your father is dead," Kingston said, watching the young man's reaction. "There are signs of a violent death. I need to ask you a few questions." Keenan staggered as if he had been struck. His clean-shaven face turned pale, his eyes filled with disbelief. "No, that's impossible. I spoke to him yesterday. He was fine." "When exactly did you speak to your father?" Kingston asked quickly. "In the evening?" "Around 6. On the phone, Keenan ran a hand through his short hair. "I can't believe it. Who did this?" "That's what we're trying to find out." Kingston pointed to an old wicker chair on the porch. "Please sit down. Are you in any condition to answer questions?" Before Keenan could answer, a young woman ran up to the house. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a messy bun, her dark skin contrasting with her bright red jacket. She looked to be about 24 years old. "Keenan!" she exclaimed, hugging the young man. "My God, what happened?" "The neighbor called and said the police were here." "Tandy, Dad," was all Keenan could say before his voice broke. Detective Kingston cleared his throat delicately to get their attention. "You are?" "Tandy Mortimer," the woman introduced herself, straightening up and standing in front of Keenan as if to protect him. "I'm Keenan's fiancée. What happened to Devin?" "Mr. Ziegler Sr. was found dead this morning," Kingston said, noting the change in Tandy's expression. Shock was evident, but there was no obvious grief. "We need to find out the circumstances of his death." "Oh my God," Tandy whispered, turning back to Keenan. "Honey, I'm so sorry." Keenan nodded silently, his gaze fixed on a point somewhere in space. "Were you close to your fiancé's father?" Kingston asked, watching the couple. Tandy hesitated for a moment before answering. "Devin, he had his own ideas about what Keenan's life should be. We didn't always see eye to eye. He hated her," Keenan said suddenly, his voice sounding hollow. "He thought she wasn't good enough for me. He said terrible things." "Keenan, don't," Tandy said softly, squeezing his hand. "What exactly did your father say?" Kingston asked, taking out his notebook. "That she was from a bad neighborhood, that she had a questionable family." Keenan shook his head. "It was all nonsense. He wanted to control my whole life. After my mom died, It only got worse. When did your mother die? 10 years ago. Cancer. Since then, my father became obsessed. We fought about it all the time. Keenan looked at Tandy, especially lately. Kingston made a note in his notebook. Where were you last night, Mr. Ziegler? Keenan tensed. I worked late, then I was home, alone. And you, Miss Mortimer? I had the night shift at Jackson's clinic. I'm a nurse. At that moment, an elderly woman in a dressing gown thrown over her housecoat approached the group. Detective? She called. I'm Martha Tompkins, a neighbor. I found him. Yes, Mrs. Tompkins. Kingston turned to her. Tell us what you saw or heard. Last night, around 10 o'clock, I heard shouting coming from Devon's house, she said, glancing anxiously at Keenan. Men's voices. They were shouting at each other. Did you recognize the voices? Kingston asked. One was definitely Devon, the woman said. The other, I can't say for sure. What were they arguing about? I couldn't make out the words, just shouting. Then something broke, and everything went quiet. She shook her head. I thought about calling the police, but you know how it is. Devon was often noisy. Kingston nodded, making another note. Thank you, Mrs. Tompkins. An officer will take your statement in more detail. Returning to the young couple, the detective noticed that Keenan had turned even paler. Mr. Ziegler, are you sure you didn't go to your father's house last night? I told you I was home, Keenan replied without looking up. Detective, Tandy interjected. Keenan is in shock. Maybe we should continue later? Of course, agreed Kingston. But I'll need your help. Both of you. The sooner we talk, the sooner we'll find who did this. After the couple left, the detective returned to the house. In the kitchen, forensic experts were finishing their work, photographing and collecting evidence. Anything interesting? Kingston asked the lead expert. A shoe print in the blood, he replied. Size 11 approximately. And this. The expert held out a clear bag containing a blood-stained rag. Looks like the killer tried to wipe something off. Send it in for DNA analysis. Kingston nodded thoughtfully, looking around the modest dwelling. Photos hung on the living room wall. A younger Devon with his wife and young son. Keenan in his graduation gown. Family celebrations. A life that had now been cut short by a violent death. Devon's bedroom was immaculate, almost military in its neatness. On the nightstand was a photograph of a beautiful, dark-skinned woman, probably his late wife. Next to it were several bottles of medicine. Kingston picked one up and read the label, a common painkiller. He opened the nightstand drawer and found several more packages of various medications, some without labels. It was strange for a mechanic to have such an arsenal of drugs. The detective continued his search and found an album with clippings on the bookshelf. Leafing through it, he saw articles about Kanana's achievements, school awards, college acceptance, a job at a successful technology company. Devon Ziegler was clearly proud of his son, but judging by the words of the neighbor and Kanana himself, their relationship was far from ideal. Returning to the kitchen, Kingston noticed a magnet on the refrigerator with the logo of Jackson's clinic, the same one where Tandy worked. Under the magnet was a note with the date and time of Dr. Rogers' appointment. The date was a week ago. Hey, officer, Kingston called to the young police officer. Find out who Dr. Rogers from Jackson's clinic is. Half an hour later, when Devon Ziegler's body had been taken away and the forensic team was finishing up, the officer approached Kingston with information. Dr. Alan Rogers is an infectious disease specialist at Jackson Clinic, he reported. By strange coincidence, that's the same clinic where the victim's son's fiancée works. Kingston frowned. An infectious disease specialist? Interesting. Find out if Devon Ziegler was there on the date in question. As he left the victim's house, the detective noticed a barbershop across the street with a sign that read Nouri's Style. Remembering the name of Tandy's cousin, which had appeared in the preliminary materials, he decided to check it out. Several stylists were working in the salon, and a striking woman in her late 30s was sitting behind the reception desk. Nouri Devereaux? Kingston asked, showing his badge. Yes, the woman replied warily. How can I help you? Detective Ezra Kingston. I'm investigating the death of Devon Ziegler. I know you're related to Tandy Mortimer. Nouri frowned. Is Devon dead? What happened? That's still being determined, Kingston replied evasively. Did you know him well? Well enough. Nuri crossed her arms over her chest. He was a frequent customer at our barber shop. He liked to talk. About what? Mostly about his son. Keenan this, Keenan that. She shook her head. He was obsessed with the boy. And when he brought Tandy home, God, that's when it all started. He didn't approve of their relationship? That's putting it mildly, Nuri snorted. Devin thought Tandy was after his son's money. Funny, isn't it? The guy makes good money, but he's not a millionaire. Has Tandy been sick lately? Kingston asked, unexpectedly. Nuri hesitated for a moment. What makes you think that? Just a question, the detective shrugged. She hasn't been feeling well for the last couple of weeks. The flu, probably. Nuri looked closely at Kingston. What does that have to do with anything? Maybe nothing, the detective replied. Thanks for the information. Leaving the barber shop, Kingston called the station. Check Devin Ziegler's phone records for the last month and find out if he ever worked in the medical field. The day was coming to an end, but the investigation was just beginning. Something told the detective that behind the facade of a family tragedy lay a much darker story. A story of jealousy, control, and perhaps an illness that could be a death sentence not only for the sick person. Mornings at the South Chicago police station always started the same way. The smell of strong coffee, the hum of voices and ringing phones. Detective Ezra Kingston sat at his desk, laying out the files on the Devin Ziegler case. It had been 2 days since the body was found, and it was time to tie up loose ends. On the wall in front of Kingston hung a board with photos and notes, a kind of investigation map. In the center was a photo of Devin Ziegler as he had appeared in life and at the crime scene. Next to it were photos of key figures, Kenana Ziegler, Tandy Mortimer, and Nuri Devereaux. What do we have so far? Asked Captain Rodriguez, stopping at Kingston's desk. Devin Ziegler, 55 years old, mechanic at Johnson & Sons Auto Service, Kingston began, sorting through the papers. Killed in his own home on Tuesday evening. The autopsy confirmed the cause of death as blunt force trauma to the head. The blow was delivered during a struggle, causing the victim to fall and hit his temple on the kitchen table. However, several blows were delivered with the hands prior to this. Any suspects? The main suspect is his son, Keenan Ziegler. A neighbor heard loud male voices arguing about an hour before the estimated time of death. Keenan claims he was home alone, but his car was seen parked 2 blocks from his father's house. Motive? This is where it gets interesting, Kingston sighed. I just received medical information about the son's fiancée, Tandy Mortimer. She was recently diagnosed with HIV. The captain whistled. And you think that's related to the murder? I don't know yet, but it certainly adds a new twist to the case, Kingston said, standing up and pulling on his jacket. I'm on my way back to talk to Nuri Devereaux, the bride's cousin. She owns the hair salon across the street from the victim's house and seems to know more than she told us the first time. At 10 o'clock in the morning, Nuri's hair salon was already full of customers. Black women of all ages sat under dryers, chatting and leafing through magazines. Nuri was skillfully styling a customer's complex hairdo when she noticed Kingston enter. You again, detective, she sighed. You're scaring my customers away. We need to talk, Mrs. Devereaux, not here. Nuri nodded to her assistant to finish with the customer and led the detective into a small break room at the back of the salon. I don't have much time, she said, closing the door. What did you want to know? Tell me more about Devin's relationship with his son and his fiancée. Kingston sat down on the edge of the worn sofa. Last time you mentioned that he didn't approve of their relationship. Nuri snorted, sinking into the chair opposite him. Disapproved is putting it mildly. Devin was obsessed with controlling Kinhan's life. After his wife died, the boy became his whole world. He monitored his every move, chose his friends, his college, his job. And as long as Kinnan obeyed, everything was fine. And then Tandy came along. Exactly, Nuri nodded. My cousin is a strong girl, not the type to back down. Devin immediately realized that she would take his son away from him, and he hated her. What exactly did he do? He tried to turn Keenan against her. He spread rumors. He said terrible things. Nuri fell silent as if deciding whether to continue. Like what? That she had other men. That she only wanted his money. Typical nonsense from a father-in-law who wasn't ready to let his son go. She shook her head. But for the first time in his life, Keenan didn't listen. He and Tandy got engaged 3 months ago. How did Devin react? He threatened to disinherit his son. Ridiculous, isn't it? What inheritance? An old house and a beat-up Chevrolet? Nuri smiled bitterly. But it's not about the money. Devin couldn't accept losing his power. Kingston made a note in his notebook. What do you know about Tandy's recent illness? Nuri's face changed instantly. She tensed, her eyes narrowing. What exactly are you talking about? Miss Devereaux, I understand that Tandy Mortimer was recently diagnosed with HIV, Kingston said bluntly. Is this relevant to the investigation? Nuri was silent for a few seconds, then sighed heavily. Tandy found out about the diagnosis 2 weeks ago. She was in shock. She couldn't understand how she got infected. Nuri's voice trembled. Tandy isn't the type who, well, you know, she only had Keenan, and she was sure he was clean. Did Keenan know about the diagnosis? Yes, Tandy told him right away. He got tested. Negative. Nuri leaned forward. You understand what that means? Either Tandy was cheating on him, or someone deliberately infected her some other way. Kingston finished for her. Do you have any idea who might have done this? Nuri looked away. Tandy works at the clinic. She could have been infected there accidentally. Do you believe that? She fell silent. Listen, I can't accuse someone without proof. This is a serious accusation. Devin Ziegler is dead, Miss Devereaux, and if his death is connected to Tandy's diagnosis, I need to know the whole truth. Nuri stood up and paced the small room. A week ago, Tandy told me something strange. She remembered that about a month ago, Devin had treated her and Kanana to homemade wine when they came over for dinner. Only she felt sick after one glass. She thought it was just a reaction to the alcohol, but now you suspect that Devin might have deliberately infected Tandy? It sounds crazy, doesn't it? Nuri laughed nervously. How would he have done that? Where would he have gotten infected blood? Did Devin have any connections to medical facilities? He recently took a part-time job as a cleaner at a clinic, the same one where Tandy works. He said he was close to retirement and needed to save up. Nuri suddenly turned pale. My God, you think he could have... I'm not saying anything, Kingston replied calmly. But I'll check into it. Did Tandy tell Keenan about her suspicions? I don't know. She wasn't sure herself. It sounds crazy. Nuri shook her head. But if Keenan found out and believed it, God, I don't know what he might have done. Leaving the barber shop, Kingston headed straight for Jackson's clinic. The small medical facility served mainly low-income residents of the neighborhood. Partly funded by the state, the clinic specialized in primary care and treatment of common diseases, including HIV. Detective Kingston, Chicago Police Department. He introduced himself to the administrator, showing his badge. I need to speak with the clinic director and Dr. Alan Rogers. 15 minutes later, Kingston was sitting in the office of the clinic's director, Dr. Price, a thin man with tired eyes. How can I help you, Detective? I'm investigating the murder of Devin Ziegler. As far as I know, he worked for you as a janitor. Yes, for the last 2 months. Price nodded. He was a good worker. No complaints. We're all shocked by his death. Did he have access to medical waste? Dr. Price frowned. Of course, he cleaned the treatment rooms, but all hazardous waste is disposed of according to strict protocol. Have there been any breaches of protocol? Any missing medical supplies? Are you implying something, Detective? Kingston leaned forward. Dr. Price, I'm not just investigating a murder. I have reason to believe that Devin Ziegler may have been involved in the deliberate infection of a person with HIV. The clinic director's face fell. That's impossible. How could he? Do you check your blood supplies and samples? Do you keep records of all tests? Price turned pale. There was an incident a month ago. A blood sample from an HIV-positive patient went missing. We conducted an internal investigation, but decided it was a documentation error. Such samples are stored in a special refrigerator that only staff have access to. But not the cleaners? Technically, no, but... Dr. Price faltered. The keys are kept in the doctor's office. If someone knows the staff schedule well... I need records of Devin Ziegler's visit to Dr. Rogers 2 weeks ago, Kingston said. and his complete schedule here. After obtaining the necessary documents, Kingston met with Dr. Alan Rogers, a tall, nervous man with a neatly trimmed beard. "Did Devin Ziegler consult with you about HIV infection?" the detective asked after exchanging pleasantries. "I can't discuss the details of consultations," Rogers replied. "Doctor-patient confidentiality." "Dr. Rogers, this is a murder investigation and a possible case of intentional infection. I can get a warrant, but that will take time, which we don't have." Rogers nodded reluctantly. "Yes, Devin came in for a consultation. He said he was concerned about his health. He asked questions about HIV transmission and how long the virus survives outside the body." "What specific questions? Can the virus be transmitted through food or drink if infected blood gets into it?" Dr. Rogers frowned. "I explained that although it is theoretically possible under certain conditions, in practice such cases are extremely rare. HIV dies quickly outside the body. But it's still possible? With fresh blood entering the body through a mucous membrane injury. Yes, there is a risk. But I never thought that he..." Rogers fell silent, realizing where the detective was going with this. God, that's terrible. As he left the clinic, Kingston felt the pieces of the puzzle starting to fall into place. However, he needed additional evidence. He headed for Keenan Ziegler's apartment. Keenan lived in a relatively new apartment building in a more affluent part of the neighborhood. His fourth-floor apartment was tastefully furnished, if modestly. When Kingston rang the doorbell, Tandy opened the door. "Detective?" She looked pale and tired. "Is something wrong?" "I need to talk to Keenan," Kingston said. "Is he home?" "Yes, but he's not in the best shape. His father's funeral is the day after tomorrow and he..." "This is important," the detective said insistently. Tandy reluctantly let him in. Keenan sat in the living room, staring at the wall. An untouched glass of whiskey stood in front of him. "Mr. Ziegler," Kingston began, "I have some new questions about the night your father died." Keenan slowly turned his head. "I already told you everything. I was at home. Your car was spotted 2 blocks from your father's house at about the same time a neighbor reported hearing an argument," Kingston said, watching Keenan's reaction closely. "Are you changing your story?" Tandy tensed, standing behind Keenan's chair as if to protect him. "Do you have a warrant, detective?" she asked. "Keenan just buried his father. Can't this wait?" "I'm afraid not," Kingston replied. "Mr. Ziegler, I am aware of Miss Mortimer's diagnosis, and I am aware that your father consulted with Dr. Rogers about HIV transmission through fluids. Did you suspect that your father might have intentionally infected Tandy?" A heavy silence hung in the room. Keenan continued to stare at one spot, but his hands, resting on the armrests of the chair, clenched into fists. "Keenan, don't say anything," Tandy said quietly. "We need a lawyer." "Why a lawyer if he has nothing to hide?" Kingston asked. "Because you're clearly trying to accuse him of murder," Tandy said. "Detective, please leave. We'll contact you through our lawyer." Kingston nodded and stood up. "As you wish. But I must warn you that I will soon have enough evidence to obtain a search warrant. If you are hiding anything, it would be best to tell me now." As he headed for the door, Keenan suddenly spoke up. "I was there." "Keenan, no!" Tandy exclaimed. "I have to, Tandy," Keenan replied quietly. "I was at my father's house that evening, detective. We had an argument." Kingston returned and sat down opposite him. "What was the argument about?" "About Tandy. About her diagnosis," Keenan said, looking up with pain in his eyes. "I found out that my father was working part-time at the clinic where she works. It seemed strange to me. He'd never been interested in medicine. And all these questions about her health. He kept asking if she was sick. What happened that evening? I went to see him. I asked him straight out if he had anything to do with Tandy's illness." Keenan swallowed. At first he denied everything. Then he said he did it for me, that he wanted to protect me from a con artist, from a bad marriage. Did he admit that he infected her? Not directly. He said something like, "That girl will think twice before going after your money now." I lost control. I lunged at him. "And you hit him?" "Several times," Keenan admitted. "But then I stopped. He was alive when I left, I swear. He was just sitting on the floor wiping the blood off his face. He said I'd regret my decision, that she'd destroy me. What time was that? Around 10 o'clock at night. I left right after the fight. I was home by 11. Can anyone confirm that? Keenan shook his head. I was alone. Tandy was working the night shift. Kingston made a note in his notebook. Mr. Ziegler, I'm going to have to ask you to come with me to the station for an official statement. He didn't do it, Tandy interrupted. Keenan didn't kill his father. If that's the case, an official statement will help him, Kingston said, and we'll need to take a DNA sample to compare with the evidence at the crime scene. Keenan slowly stood up. I'll go with you, Detective. I want this to be over. While Keenan was getting ready, Tandy took Kingston aside. I know what you're thinking. That Keenan had a motive, but he wasn't capable of murder. Miss Mortimer, people are capable of many things when it comes to protecting their loved ones, Kingston replied quietly, especially if someone has deliberately harmed them. Tears glistened in her eyes. Devin was a monster. He controlled every aspect of Keenan's life, and when he realized he was losing control, she fell silent. You know, I didn't believe he could have infected me on purpose. Even when I got sick, it seemed impossible that a father could do that to his son. When did Keenan find out about your suspicions? I never told him directly, but I mentioned the night I got sick from the wine. Keenan put two and two together. Tandy wiped away a tear. He loves me, Detective, but I never asked him to stand up to his father like that. Did he tell you about the fight with his father? Just that his father denied everything. He didn't say he hit him. She shook her head. Keenan isn't a murderer. If his father died as a result of their fight, it was an accident. At the station, Keenan officially changed his statement. Yes, he was at his father's house on the night of his death. Yes, they got into a fight after Devin indirectly admitted to deliberately infecting Tandy. But Keenan insisted that his father was alive when he left. He even shouted after me that I'd be back, that Tandy would leave me when she realized I was worthless without his support, Keenan said, staring at the table. If I wanted to kill him, why would I leave him conscious? The technical department reported that the bloodstains at the crime scene and on the clothes Keenan was wearing that evening, which he voluntarily handed over to the police, matched. Keenan's fingerprints were found in the kitchen, which was not surprising given that he regularly visited his father. I need Devin's HIV test results, Kingston told the lab technician after the interrogation, and check if the virus strain matches Tandy Mortimer's, if it's positive. The next morning, the detective met with Nuri Devereaux again. She was nervously smoking behind her hair salon. Did you arrest Keenan? She asked when she saw Kingston. Not yet. He gave a statement about the fight with his father, but he claims he didn't kill him. Nuri exhaled smoke. Do you believe him? It's my job to follow the evidence, not my beliefs, Kingston replied. Miss Devereaux, were you near Devin's house on the evening of his death? What? Nuri tensed. Why are you asking? Because there was about an hour between Kinane's departure and Devin's estimated time of death. Someone else could have visited him during that time. And you think it was me? Nuri laughed, but her eyes remained serious. Why would I kill an old man? Maybe to protect Tandy, or to avenge her. You knew about her diagnosis. You could have guessed who was responsible. Nuri stubbed out her cigarette. Detective, I was at the Blue Note Club with my friends all evening. Ask the bartender, Ray. He knows me. We were there from 9 until 2 in the morning. Kingston nodded, making a note. I'll check it out. One more question. Did Tandy tell you about her suspicions about Devin before he died? Nuri looked away. She hinted at it. She didn't accuse him directly. She just said it was strange to get sick when your only partner is healthy. Did you tell Keenan about these suspicions? Nuri tensed. I spoke to him once. I told him that Tandy was sick, that it was serious, that it was strange how she could have gotten infected working at the clinic, and that it was strange how his father suddenly started working at the same clinic. Did you accuse Devin directly? No. Nuri shook her head. But Keenan is a smart guy. He didn't need an explanation. When did this conversation take place? The day before Devin died, Nuri replied quietly. I didn't know he was going to confront his father, I swear. Back at the station, Kingston found the test results on his desk. Devin Ziegler's blood was HIV positive. What's more, genetic analysis confirmed that the strain of the virus in Devin and Tandy was identical. "My God," Kingston whispered. He was infected himself. The puzzle was starting to come together, but some pieces still didn't fit. If Devin was HIV positive, why would he steal blood samples from the clinic? And if he really did infect Tandy, why did he infect himself? Kingston returned to the case files, rereading the statements and reports. Then it dawned on him. He looked again at Devin's medical records from the clinic. He had been diagnosed with HIV just a month ago, after he started working at the clinic. But before the night, Tandy got sick from the wine. This wasn't just revenge. It was the desperation of a man who had been given a death sentence and decided to take down the woman he considered a threat to his son's well-being. A phone call interrupted the detective's thoughts. "Detective Kingston? This is Dr. Summers from the lab. We have the results of the analysis of the rag found at the crime scene." "And?" "There is blood from two people, the victim and someone else, and that someone else is not Keenan Ziegler." Kingston felt a chill run down his spine. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. The DNA doesn't match. This person is a woman." Kingston slowly put down the phone, staring at the board with the case files. The photo of Tandy Mortimer seemed to be staring right at him. Coincidentally or not, she was working the night shift on the day of the murder, and she had the strongest motive for revenge. Style Nouri's hair salon was closed when Detective Kingston pulled up early in the morning. Nouri Devereaux sat on the steps, smoking a cigarette and glancing nervously at her watch. When she saw the detective, she slowly stood up, tossing her cigarette butt into a trash can. "I knew you'd come," she said without surprise, "after that call from the lab." Kingston stopped a few steps away from her. "The blood on the rag found in Devin's house belongs to a woman, Miss Devereaux, and it's not Tandy's." Nouri smiled bitterly and joylessly. "It took you a while, Detective. Come in. No need for the neighbors to hear." She unlocked the door to the barber shop, and they went inside. Empty chairs, mirrors, and turned-off dryers created a ghostly atmosphere. Nouri turned on only the desk lamp at the reception desk, leaving most of the salon in semi-darkness. "I didn't kill him," Nouri said, sitting down on a high chair. "At least not directly." "But you were there," Kingston stated, "after Keenan left." Nouri nodded. "Yes, I saw Keenan run out of his father's house. He was furious, Detective. I've never seen him so lost. I called him, but he didn't answer, so I decided to check what had happened myself." "And what did you find?" "Devin. He was sitting at the kitchen table wiping blood from his face. He was laughing. He said Keenan had finally shown his true colors." Nouri shook her head. "He was drunk and talkative." "What did you talk about?" "Tandy." "About how she caught the disease." Nouri paused. "I asked him directly, 'Did you do this?' Do you know what he said?" "Of course I did. Who else would protect my boy from that whore?" Kingston made a note in his notebook. "Did he admit how he infected her?" "Not right away. First he bragged about how smart he was, how he planned everything." Nouri smiled bitterly. Then he said he found out about his diagnosis by accident. A routine checkup at the clinic, and suddenly, HIV. No symptoms, just a positive test result. "When was that?" "A month before what happened to Tandy." Devin was in shock. He said he wanted to kill himself at first. Then he started working at the clinic, supposedly for extra money, but in reality... She fell silent. "In reality, he was looking for a way to get revenge," Kingston finished for her. "Yes, he decided that if he was going to die, he would take the woman who was destroying his son's life with him. His words, not mine." Nouri grimaced. "He stole a sample of his own blood from the lab, and then when Tandy and Keenan came home for dinner, he slipped his blood into Tandy's glass." Kingston froze, imagining the scene. "Are you sure?" "He told me himself. He laughed as he told me how Tandy tasted something strange but drank the wine out of politeness." Nouri covered her face with her hands. "I couldn't believe it. He spoke about it with such pride, as if he had accomplished something heroic." "What happened next?" "I started yelling at him. I told him he was a monster, that he would kill Tandy, and he laughed and said, 'At least I'll die thinking I saved my son.'" Nouri looked up at the detective. "I hit him. Hard. He fell and hit his head on the edge of the table, but he got up. He kept mocking me. And you hit him again? Nuri shook her head. No, I left. I swear he was alive when I left. He was staggering, but he was standing. He shouted after me, saying that I was just like Tandy, that we had both ruined his son. I just slammed the door and left. What time was that? Around 11, maybe a little later. I went to Tandy's clinic to tell her everything, but I couldn't. She was already suffering. To know that you were deliberately infected. Nuri fell silent. In the morning, I found out that Devon was dead. Kingston looked closely at the woman. Why didn't you tell us right away? I was scared. I was there. My blood was probably left at the crime scene, she sighed. And I wanted to protect Kenan and Tandy. They don't deserve what happened to them. I need to verify your statement, said the detective, and take a DNA sample for comparison. I understand, Nuri nodded. Do what you have to do. After talking to Nuri, Kingston went to the station, where a report from the medical clinic was waiting for him. After studying the documents, he found confirmation of Nuri's words. Devon Ziegler had indeed tested positive for HIV a month before Tandy's alleged infection, and sure enough, he had applied for a job at the clinic on the same day. Another piece of evidence, surveillance footage from the lab, showed Devon entering the biological sample storage room after his shift ended. The next day, a record appeared in the logbook indicating that a blood sample was missing, his own. Kingston gathered all the case files and went to the holding cell where Kenan Ziegler was being held. The young man looked exhausted, his eyes red from lack of sleep and his hands trembling nervously. Detective, he nodded wearily. Mr. Ziegler, I have new information, Kingston said, sitting down opposite him. Nuri Devereaux was at your father's house after you left. She confirms that Devon was alive when she left. Kenan blinked in confusion. Nuri? What was she doing there? The same thing you were, demanding answers. Kingston opened the folder of documents. I have proof that your father did infect Tandy with HIV, intentionally, using his own blood. God, Kenan whispered, clutching his head in his hands. I knew, but to hear it confirmed. I need to know the whole truth about that night, Mr. Ziegler, Kingston said firmly. What happened after you found out what your father had done? Kenan was silent for a long time, then slowly raised his eyes. You won't believe me, detective. Try me. I didn't kill him, Kenan said quietly. Although I wanted to. God, how I wanted to. Tell me everything from the beginning. Kenan took a deep breath and began to speak. It all started with a simple suspicion. Tandy got sick and the doctors diagnosed her with HIV. I got tested. Negative. It didn't make sense. We'd been together for 2 years, and neither of us had any other partners. Tandy didn't use drugs or get any untested tattoos. How could she have gotten it? When did you start suspecting your father? Not right away. At first, I thought she might have gotten it at work, an accidental needle stick or something like that. But then, Kenan fell silent. Nuri hinted that my father was acting strangely. He got a job at the same clinic where Tandy worked. He started asking questions about her health. And you decided to confront him? Yes. That evening, I went to his house. I was beside myself with rage and fear. Kenan shook his head. I asked him directly, do you have anything to do with Tandy's illness? He denied everything. He said I was crazy, that Tandy must have been cheating on me. But you didn't believe him? I knew Tandy. I knew she couldn't. Kenan swallowed. I pressed him harder. I told him I knew about his work at the clinic, about his visits to the doctor. And then he confessed. What exactly did he say? Yes, I did it. And I'd do it again. That's what he said. Kenan's voice faltered. He said she was ruining my life, that I could find someone better, from a decent family. And then he said it didn't matter anymore because he was sick, that he was dying and wanted to make sure he didn't die for nothing. Did you hit him? Yes, several times. He didn't fight back. He just kept saying horrible things about Tandy, about how I was an ungrateful son, that he always wanted the best for me. Kenan closed his eyes. I stopped when he started bleeding from his nose. I was scared I was going to kill him, although part of me wanted to. What happened next? I left. I just turned around and walked out before I did something irreparable. He yelled after me that I'd come back, that Tandy would leave me when she realized I was nothing without him. Keenan opened his eyes. I was home by 11. I didn't leave until morning, I swear. Kingston watched Keenan closely, trying to detect the slightest sign of a lie, but all he saw was pain and sincerity. In the morning, you found out about your father's death. Yes, a neighbor called. Keenan shook his head. I was in shock. Part of me felt relieved. And that's terrible, isn't it? Feeling relief at the death of your own father. Did you tell Tandy about your father's confession? No, I couldn't. How could I tell her that my own father? He fell silent. She was already suffering. Why add to that? Kingston nodded, making his final notes. Mr. Ziegler, the autopsy results confirm your version of events. Your father was alive after you left. The blood on the rag found at the crime scene belongs to Nuri Devereaux, who admitted to hitting him but claims he was alive when she left. Then who? The medical examiner believes that the cause of death was not a single blow, but a combination of injuries. Your father was injured by you, then by Miss Devereaux. He may have fallen again after she left. Kingston closed the folder. Given all the circumstances, the prosecutor may consider manslaughter or even accidental death. Keenan stared silently at his hands, as if he could see blood on them. What happens now? You will remain in custody until charges are filed. Given the new evidence and mitigating circumstances, you have a chance of getting probation, Kingston said. It's important that you voluntarily admitted to fighting with your father. What about Tandy? Keenan asked quietly. Does she know? Yes. Nuri told her everything. Kingston paused. She's waiting outside. She wants to see you. When Tandy entered the visiting room, Keenan could barely hold back his tears. She looked pale and exhausted, but her eyes were filled with determination. I know everything, she said, sitting down across from him. About what your father did, and about how you tried to protect me. I'm sorry, Keenan whispered. I should have figured it out sooner. I should have stopped him. It's not your fault, Tandy said, reaching across the table and touching his fingers. None of us is to blame, only him. What are we going to do now? Keenan asked. With your illness, with this case, live, Tandy replied simply. One day at a time. I'll get treatment. You'll deal with the court. We'll get through this, Keenan, together. There was such confidence in her eyes that Keenan felt the weight of the last few days lift a little. I love you, he said, no matter what happens. And I love you. 2 weeks later, the court handed down its verdict. Keenan Ziegler received a suspended sentence for assault resulting in manslaughter with mitigating circumstances. Given his father's lack of a criminal record and the nature of the crime, the court showed leniency. Detective Kingston stood at the entrance to the courthouse, watching Keenan and Tandy walk down the steps, holding hands. Next to them was Nuri, who had been given community service for concealing information about the crime. Do you think justice has been served, Detective? Asked Captain Rodriguez, who had approached them. Kingston shook his head slowly. I'm not sure there can be any justice in this case, Captain. Devin Ziegler was sick, in body and soul. His obsession with controlling his son, his fear of losing the last thing he had left. That doesn't excuse his actions, but it helps to understand them. And the young people? What do you think will happen to them? Kingston watched the three of them get into the car. Tandy was saying something, and Keenan smiled faintly, for the first time since they had met. They have a long road ahead of them. Living with HIV in our society isn't easy, especially in neighborhoods like theirs. Prejudice, fear, lack of information, he sighed. But they have a chance, and they have each other. You're a philosopher, Kingston, the captain smiled. Let's go. We have a new case. The detective nodded, glancing one last time at the receding car. The story of the Ziegler family was just one of many tragedies he had witnessed over the years. But something about it struck him particularly. Perhaps the universality of human suffering, the fear of loss, the desire to protect those you love, even at the cost of irreparable mistakes. Ultimately, Kingston thought as he walked to his car, Even the most heinous crimes often begin with simple human emotions: love, fear, anger. The line between protection and revenge, between justice and cruelty, is too easily blurred in a moment of despair. But where one story ended in tragedy, another could begin with hope. Keenan and Tandy, despite everything they had been through, chose life. And perhaps that was the only justice available to them, the right to continue living in spite of everything Devon Ziegler had tried to take from them.